Okay, welcome to the first question and answer recording from the postponed International Conference on Professional and Practice Based Doctorates, which is now due to take place on the 25th and 26th of February 2021 at York Racecourse in the United Kingdom. The conference is focused on the role of practice in doctoral degrees. I'm Pauline Armsby, a member of the conference steering committee, asking the questions today to the first of our keynote speakers, Gill Houston, who is currently chair of the UKCGE's Board of Trustees since July 2018. Hello, Gill.
Hi, Pauline.
Hi. Gill has a wide-ranging experience of higher education, latterly focused on postgraduate education. Activities include developing and implementing higher education policy in the UK and internationally in the universities sector and more widely, such as in the QAA. Gill, your conference presentation entitled The UK Doctorate, Maintaining Quality and Standards in a Shifting Landscape will include next year national and international frameworks pertaining to quality and standards, the role of assessment in maintaining doctoral standards, including the oral examination, and outcomes from the doctoral examination process that could focus more explicitly on professional and personal attributes. But in the meantime, we've received some questions from delegates and I'd like to put these to you now, okay?
Yeah.
Great, okay, so I've got a number of questions here. I'm going to start with the first one, which is, of the myriad of things that could be done, what one change do you think would be most helpful for doctoral outcomes to be more practical?
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me to do this first. And thanks to those who provided the questions. Regarding this first question, apart from the practical application of each graduate's research outcomes, there's something that I found that I thought was particularly important. And that was that candidates were often not aware of all the attributes they possess when they complete their doctorate and graduate. Many of these are displayed by them in the doctoral examination, and they're interdependent. The attributes are demonstrated in both the thesis or its equivalent and the viva, and they're a mix of research, professional and personal qualities that together demonstrate your ability to conduct research independently. This remains, of course, the stated purpose of the exam. And the attributes as a whole help doctoral graduates to be eminently employable in many spheres, whether their subject is vocational or not. Actions that could be taken to accentuate these attributes and therefore help doctoral graduates to be more aware of their marketability and value in wider society, I think include, during the doctorate, whatever subject you're studying, universities can use elements of the training to discuss with candidates the wide range of attributes they possess and are developing, depending on what part of the training they're at, and how they all come together in the research programme. Using one of the many personal development packages offered by universities specifically for use at doctoral level, candidates could be required to reflect on all their experiences during the programme, including in any placements or work experience, and record the skills that they think they were using at each stage, so they have evidence of their capabilities. And I think this could raise awareness of the value of those attributes in different contexts and increase graduates' confidence of their ability to be successful in the next stage of their career. I'm not suggesting this personal development information should necessarily be part of the assessment, although that might be a logical next step. And if I'm allowed 2 points, not one, I'd also suggest that universities require examiners to comment explicitly on the candidate's professional and personal attributes in their post-viva report, and if possible, demonstrating how these characteristics have contributed to their judgment.
Great, thank you very much, Jill. That's very interesting. Looking at the attributes and experiences that the candidates have, and that final point about examiners commenting on it is very interesting. The next question actually goes on to talk about the panels a bit more. So it's, what are the issues concerning Viva panels during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Ah, yes, that's a very good question too. There's no doubt that the huge increase in online Vivas necessitated by the pandemic has been a major change and a challenge for all concerned. An online Viva should, as far as possible, mirror the face-to-face experience. The UK Council for Graduate Education became aware of the need to produce guidance for online Vivas immediately the pandemic started, and this has been available on our website since early April, since when we've added other materials to support candidates in preparing for their Vivas, and some of this is appropriate for any Viva, not just the online version. Our guidance runs to 6 pages, which is obviously too much to cover here, but I'll just mention 3 of the issues that I think are particularly important. The first is technical support for all actors before and during the Viva is essential to ensure that if there are any glitches, major or minor, everyone has backup available. For example, that phone contact is possible during the examination. It's the university's responsibility to set up the technology and provide support, and to ensure that before the Viva begins, all the participants are proficient enough for it to go ahead without the technology being any kind of barrier. Alternative communications such as phone should be put in place before the Viva, so everybody knows they can communicate if something goes wrong. My second point is concerning the role of the independent chair, which of course assumes even greater importance in online Vivas. They are responsible for ensuring the candidate isn't disadvantaged by the Viva format. It's essential that any additional stress for the candidate is minimised, obviously, because they're going to be the most nervous. And to facilitate communication between the examiners and the candidate, and to help resolve any technical problems. So it's a major role in the online Viva. They also have the authority to stop the exam at any point, either for technical reasons or because they can see that the candidate needs a break. Regarding the candidate's well-being, they should have someone they can turn to, particularly at the end of the Viva, while waiting for the examiners to finalise their recommendations. This could be a friend, a family member, or someone else who can be on hand, either in their household or who's contactable virtually in some way. And last but not least, some aspects of distance Vivas can pose additional challenges. For example, speech delays, speech distortion, the need for the person speaking to pause occasionally to make sure the other person has understood them and can hear properly. Candidates should be aware it's perfectly okay, as in a normal Viva, to ask an examiner to repeat the question or to phrase it differently if they haven't understood what they're asking. And everybody should be advised to ensure they won't be interrupted by noises off, like the phone going off, so phones being on silent. And I just wanted to mention one other thing, which I think is quite interesting, and it's a problem that hasn't, I don't think, been solved yet. It came up during a recent Society for Research into Higher Education discussion, which was a webinar, an online webinar. And it's the question of whether supervisors had the ability to illicitly contact the candidate during the Viva to help them answer the questions. Now, I actually hadn't thought of that, I must admit. And actually, I think it's extremely unlikely, but we discussed the alternatives then made by, provided by the technology to block communications between participants during the Viva. And that's obviously that's possible using a variety of packages. I'm not going to advertise any of them, but one of them is the one we're using today. But this doesn't address the question of if the phones are on silent, whether if the supervisor is there as a silent observer in the Viva, which of course is possible virtually, it doesn't stop them sending a text or an email to a candidate on their phone. And nobody during the webinar came up with any solutions to that issue. The recording of the session, which includes a presentation on virtual supervision by Dr. Matthew Sillance from University of East Anglia, is available from the SRHE website if anybody's interested.
Great, okay, thank you very much for that, Jill. Very interesting, and again, quite a lot of the concerns are about the technological problems, which I'm sure we've all experienced before in everyday situations, and of course they're highlighted and even more important where the doctoral examination is taking place.
Yes, exactly.
So I'll move on to the third question, if that's okay now.
Yes, of course.
That's you completed your PhD research in education in 2018. What outcomes of your research have lessons for the international community?
Oh yes, I think this is quite challenging, but of course it's what every PhD candidate dreads, you know, the so what question. And we're all supposed to have international resonance now. Actually, I think my answer to question one has a lot of relevance to this question as well. All doctoral graduates, irrespective of their country of study and subject, need to be aware of their capabilities, whether they plan to remain in their home country or travel overseas for the next stage of their career. And so the importance of them being confident of what they can do and to be aware of how to market themselves is particularly important in an international context. And of course, subject conventions transcend country borders, and often external examiners may be sourced internationally. For example, in Australia, where there's no Viva, there's, I think, always one, sometimes two international examiners. So the resonance of the findings about doctoral graduates not necessarily being aware of everything they can do when they graduate is actually relevant across the board. I think another thing I'd say is that one of the most interesting outcomes for me of my research was the extent of agreement among examiners of the attributes that they're seeking in doctoral candidates in the thesis and the Viva. And again, this is an international perspective. And in my thesis, I was able to group these into a typology that I could just talk about for a couple of minutes. What was really interesting was the extent to which the professional and personal attributes contributed to the person being judged capable of independent research. So there are 4 attribute groups that emerged from my research, which came from observing 10 people's Vivas across different subjects in science, social sciences and arts. And the first one is the question of originality and a contribution to knowledge. And of course, that's a priority for all the examiners who I interviewed. And interestingly, although candidates may not have been aware of all the other attributes they had, one thing they were all certain that the examiners were looking for was originality. So clearly this had been absorbed by them quite early on in their programme. So that is one group on its own. There were differences between STEM subjects and arts, humanities and social sciences in the terminology used. So in STEM, most candidates were thought to make a contribution, but few to display true originality. And in arts, humanities and social sciences, it was thought that most display originality, but that only exceptional candidates made a contribution to knowledge. And I was really interested how the use of the terminology differed. I mean, they were talking about the same thing. In other words, there's only a few people who are exceptional, but they turned the words around. So that was interesting. The second group was about publishability. And for some, this was equally important as originality, for some examiners, I mean. So in arts, humanities and social sciences, the examiners want the work to be publishable, but fewer expect candidates to have published during the PhD. And whereas in STEM subjects, depending on the convention of the subject, of course, so for example, in biological sciences, it's often now the case that candidates would have a thesis that consists of 3 publications perhaps, but that's not so common outside of STEM. But that's a massive generalization. You really have to look at it subject by subject. The third group was about research competence, and this is where it gets interesting and where professional and personal attributes really support research competence. So STEM examiners focused on technical capability, experiment design, data interpretation, reproducibility and analysis of results, whereas arts, humanities and social sciences examiners were more concerned with choice of methodology, whether the methods chosen had enabled candidates to answer the research questions, etc. However, they all were seeking research integrity in this group. And some of the professional stroke personal characteristics that were sought when they were talking about research competence were creativity, flair, initiative and breadth, which are useful in many, many contexts. And finally, nearly finished, intellectual rigor. And I had to group these slightly arbitrarily, but I think that it's actually worked and it stands up to closer attention. So these attributes included critical, analytical and reflective thinking, problem solving and logic, independent thought and research leadership. There were no subject variations, and the integration between the research and the professional and personal attributes was such that they were often indistinguishable. And I think that makes my point about them all being interdependent. So I hope that's relevant. I found also that some of the attributes that came from my research resonated with previous researchers' findings like Nyquist, Mullins and Kiley, and Winter, Griffiths and Green.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for that answer there, Jill. It was very interesting, and particularly in relation to the disciplines and how things might differ. The last and final question actually picks up on that. It's quite a long question, so yeah. I'll read it as carefully as possibly. Much government-funded research now tends to be offered under the heading of research and innovation, with caveats such as the New Horizon Europe defining its research mission areas as covering climate change, cancer, smart cities, oceans and water, soil, health and food. Is there a risk to doctoral research in important discipline areas such as the arts and humanities, and generally to the future of professional and practice-based doctorates from this increasing prescription of research areas that will be funded?
That is a very, very challenging question, if I might say so. I think it probably falls into 2 parts. So the first part is, I think, concerns the mission areas and funding, and the second is about professional and practice-based doctorates. So if it's okay, I'll come to them in that order. It's true, of course, that much of the research budget reflects the many scientific challenges facing the UK and the world. But I think the increase in interdisciplinary research does bring together quite a few different areas and tends to bring in STEM with arts and humanities and social sciences. And one example of this is the Global Challenges Research Fund, which it addresses needs in developing countries rather than the UK. But I was looking at this recently, and I noticed that its interdisciplinary research hubs involve diverse subjects, and that they focus on major issues for everybody, such as health and well-being, sustainable economies, human rights, clean air and water, and providing high quality education. So I think that does start to bring together a multidisciplinary approach to solving some of these problems. The question, I think, highlights in particular the difference between the UK's public research budgets for sciences and arts, which have long been quite far apart. And I had a look also for the same reason recently at the most recent UKRI annual report and accounts, that's for 2018-19. And just to illustrate this point, funding for research and innovation allocated by AHRC in that year amounted to, I've got to get my piece of paper here, over 124.1 million, ESRC around 254.3 million, compared with EPSRC at around 1.2 billion. So that's quite a difference. MRC 700.1 million and BBSRC 456.1 million. Now, of course, these larger numbers for science funding do reflect the costs involved in researching these subjects. So I don't want to be unfair, because they often also include large infrastructure budgets. Now, coming on to professional and practice-based doctorates, and of course, what I should have said before is that the numbers of doctoral candidates funded in sciences way outnumber those in arts and social sciences. Professional and practice-based doctorates, well, as many people will know, I think, the numbers of doctoral candidates studying on for professional doctorates is declining. So according to a recent report based on some specially commissioned data from the Higher Education Statistics Agency, numbers of these candidates dropped from 817 in 2008-9 to 480 in 2017-18. And in this report, one of the reasons for this was given as the decline in the EdD linked to teacher education. But some of the higher numbers, of course, remain in educational business, though, despite that decline. And in psychology, which you, Pauline, would know, is a doctorate that you must have to practice. So it's one of the practice-based and professional doctorates. It's one of the few that span the two areas. But if numbers of doctoral candidates are to increase, as is suggested in the current industrial strategy, and if as a result of the pandemic, some people want to retrain or embark on a higher degree, there may well be opportunities for mid-career professionals to undertake doctorates, especially if partly sponsored by their employers, and therefore these may well be professional doctorates. So it's possible, but I guess not hugely likely that we might see a resurgence in professional doctorates, but it really depends on financial support and how well the economy bounces back after the pandemic, I would guess. And as far as practice-based doctorates are concerned, there's a huge variety of those, as we all know, and many of them are PhDs, not professional doctorates. I think a potentially similar picture is possible, but I think what is a concern is that they may well be affected by the crisis in culture-based industries and performing arts that's been caused by the pandemic if no further support is forthcoming.
Yes, again, thank you very much for that answer, very comprehensive, and of course the funding issue is always one of concern and one that's going to affect the future going forward in all areas. So Thank you very much, Gill, for all your answers. That concludes the questions I have for you. We're very much looking forward to your keynote presentation in February when it takes place up there in sunny York at the racecourse. And I'm sure you'll be able to expand on some of the questions that we've discussed today, and also have some fresh ideas for us to be thinking about in the new COVID-free, hopefully, environment that we'll be in. Thank you very much.
So. Thank you very much. I'd like to end, though, just by saying I think everyone involved in postgraduate education, doctorates and masters, have responded magnificently to the challenges caused by the pandemic. Institutions, sector bodies, everybody. So I think that's really shown us to be quick on our feet, quick to respond to challenges, and that we can meet them. So well done, everybody.
Well said. Thank you.
Thanks.